Yeah, I think AI SDRs are a really interesting topic. Um, with AI SDRs, what really happened if you look at like the first few months when they started getting traction on social media, I think some of the bigger ones were like Artisan, 11x, AI SDR. So these platforms gather a lot of attention because the premise is actually very, very powerful and interesting. Um, if
Hey, I'm Vishesh, your host. I'm a 5x founder and CTO. Still building. I also help founders like you ship faster and fix what's slowing you down. More at vishesh.space.
I'm joined by David Abaev, founder at Databar, a company that helps businesses operationalize external data. With a background in data-driven decision-making, David has led Databar.ai from a research project to a successful product company. In this conversation, we dive deep into the challenges of launching a product on ProductHunt and AppSumo, discuss the importance of data collection and customer development research, and explore practical strategies for navigating the competitive landscape.
Hey, hi, David. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, Vishesh, happy to be here.
So you are building Databar, and your journey has been interesting. So if I remember correctly, you started as an investor?
Yeah. So before founding Databar, I was an analyst in investment funds. I was an investor.
Nice. And so what made you take this leap, and where are you guys right now, and what do you do for your customers at Databar?
So the catalyst for Databar was actually born in my own challenges. As an investor, you tend to collect a lot of data on companies that you're about to invest to. You craft a deal memo, and that process, being the data nerd that I am, that process was always really painful for me. I'd have scattered files of web scrapers. I'd have to log into UI locked interfaces in order to get a specific data point. And for me, I always wanted something that would allow me to very quickly and easily collect a comprehensive data set or insight into a company that I'm looking at. And I wanted it to be really easy. So that's kind of what was the catalyst behind starting to build Databar.
And what was the gap that you saw that existing players didn't fulfill?
When we originally started back then, the research that I was doing, I did look at a lot of tools for how it could solve my personal pain as an investor. A lot of the data tools on the market back then were focused on internal data. I remember, very clearly going through, all these different websites and tools that are available. And I saw that the main tagline for all of them was something along the lines of get a handle on your data. But there was very few tools that would let you operationalize external data. So that felt like a huge gap in the market. I knew a lot of APIs, data sources, marketplaces. There was like Rapid API, Appify, which allow you to quickly scrape a website or collect a data set on a company or on a person. But none of those data sets were really easy to deploy and implement inside an organization. And that felt like a huge gap. When we just started building Databar, I think that was perhaps one of our biggest mistakes was that we didn't pick a specific pain point or a specific direction in which we wanted to implement these kind of third-party data sets, but we knew that there was a huge gap in the market. We just didn't know exactly where to look. So there was like a huge process of customer development, research, and trying to figure out where third-party data is most valuable inside an organization.
So you didn't start from, you didn't start with sales as an ICP.
No, we didn't. Actually, pretty funny if you look at our product hunt launch. I think from 2021, our very first product hunt launch was January of 2021 or 2022. I already don't remember. But if you look at our launch there, you'll see we have a completely random set of data sets. What we did before launching Databar actually was we built like an automated pipeline, which allowed us to connect new APIs really quickly. And we sort of just didn't discriminate. So we had financial data, we had crypto data sets. At one point, we even had like an anime data set, which surprisingly did really well on SEO, sent us a lot of traffic, but had no real business case. So we started really broad and we were hoping to look at which of the APIs that we connected had the highest retention and the most use, and then work from there. So that was kind of the main premise that we were trying to go off. The main problem with that approach was that it took us really long or longer than we wanted to like figure out where we want to go. But the main kind of idea in the beginning was to start relatively broad and then narrow down from there.
And so how was the journey in terms of finding the right ICP, and like right now, who's your primary customer?
Yeah, so we originally released Databar. We had all these different APIs and connectors, and the main concept behind Databar, and this was something that was completely new at the time, was that we would offer one platform and many data sources with one subscription. So you didn't have to go and maintain subscriptions to many different data providers. If you just wanted one data set or like one column from that API, you should be able to very quickly and easily get that data set without having to go through the whole procurement process, which can take up to 3 months sometimes. So the process for us was like, we released these APIs, we went on ProductHunt, we got a lot of really interested customers, a lot of inbound interest that signed up for the platform. I think we got one of the top 3 products of the day. We got like one of the top products of the week also. And that was back then when ProductHunt had, I'd say, a little bit more weight than it does today. And, that actually gave us a big audience to play with. Over a few months, what we saw was that a lot of people got really interested. They signed up for the platform. They tried to connect a data set, but then they would drop off after a week. So we had really, really bad retention, and very few customers converted into paid. But the ones that did stick around and the ones that did convert into paid, and we saw that they were coming back on a regular basis, were the ones that we tried to get calls with. And we found out that a lot of their use cases were centered around finding leads, building lists, getting data sets on companies rather than like stocks or crypto assets. So that was the main catalyst for us to dig deeper into the space and focus more into GTM use cases.
And so if I remember correctly from our last conversation, you started before or around the same time as Clay, attacking a similar kind of problem space. How are you pitted now, and what's the differentiation?
Yeah, so actually Clay originally started before we did. I think they started around like 2019, 2018, where they raised a $6 or $8 million round, at least from public sources. They raised like a $6 or $8 million round at pre-seed. But Clay was back then, I think, more of an Airtable alternative, like an Airtable competitor. The GTM aspect to it came around only 2022, I think, similar around the time when we launched. So there certainly was, like a period when we launched, there was nothing in the market. But yeah, we launched around the same time as Play, maybe a bit earlier.
And
At
so
least
did you have to reframe your strategy once you saw them pivoting towards GTM? And how has the whole pivot by them impacted you guys as well?
Yeah, so funny enough, actually, at first we didn't quite see Clay as a competitor. It seemed more like just an alternative to ZoomInfo to us, and we didn't quite have that GTM focus at the time yet. So we didn't really like monitor or track them or even look at like what they were doing. We were more so looking at a few other companies in the space that were doing more similar things to us. I'd say the main question of competition for us really arose when we made our shift to GTM, which was unrelated to Play or like what was going on. It was mostly driven by our internal customer feedback. And after we made that shift, after some time, a lot of our demo calls would be mentioning Clay. So we would start looking into it more and try to understand, okay, so what's the landscape? What are they doing in the space? What are other players doing in the space? And how can we stand out?
And so like what have they done brilliantly, and what do you guys do brilliantly? How do you stack up?
I think they did a really good job of building community. I can say that, so I think they did a really good job of building community. So if you go into LinkedIn, it's all just like. And I think very few companies are able to do that. So I, really can tip my hat to their marketing and content and community team. So I definitely think they did a good job on that. Where I think we're doing well and how we compare is we're a smaller startup, we're bootstrapped, we're scrappier, and we have to be narrower by design. So where we try to stand out is like basically making certain steps of the process of building tables really seamless. So the ease of use aspect is extremely important here. If you have to go through an agency or a freelancer or a GTM engineer to experiment on an idea that you might have, that really slows down your kind of GTM cycle. Like you have an idea, you speak to the freelancer or GTM engineer, they go out, they like build a table, that takes another few hours, and then maybe you can deploy something. Whereas with Databar, we want to make it really easy for the end user to bring their ideas to reality. So I think that ease of use and really simplified flow is extremely important. That said, where we also stand out is on the other side, is on the flexibility. So once you've experimented with an idea, Databar has an SDK and an API, which you can use to extend it into your internal systems. So you can play around with Databar as a piece to your bigger GTM puzzle, whereas I think a lot of the other platforms, while great, are a bit more UI locked, where you have to go into their platforms in order to actually build these things out.
And so there's a between, you know, you pivoting and today there has been a wave of AI SDRs. How has that impacted your business and are they a channel or a customer for you?
Yeah, I think AI SDRs are a really interesting topic. With AI SDRs, what really happened, if you look at like the first few months when they started getting traction on social media, I think some of the bigger ones were like Artisan, 11x, AI SDR. So these platforms gather a lot of attention because the premise is actually very, very powerful and interesting. You know, if you can have an SDR that works 24/7 and acts on high quality data and writes the right message at the right time, then, this is something that every company in the world would want to have. But the reality, when people start actually implementing these AI SDRs, has been that the results weren't as great as people expected, and a lot of customers turned off of it. So what I've seen with, at least in the demo calls that we've had, is that people have lost some trust towards AI SDRs. That said, I think that the hype just came a bit too early. We're gonna get there eventually, and I'm sure that like AI SDR companies are building on improving their algorithms, the way they source their data, the way they craft messages. So it's a matter of time until we get there. But then once AI SDRs are really good, the question is how do you differentiate versus all of the other thousands of companies that are using the same AI SDR? And that's where I think there's always going to be a really important element, which is the human in the loop. You have to have your own creative ideas, your own creative approaches. Otherwise, it becomes a really standardized cold email just with a little bit more personalization.
Yeah. If everybody can do it, then there's no way you can stand up.
Exactly. In financial markets, there's a really interesting concept, which is high quality data sets are really expensive for a reason. Because if a data set is cheap, then everyone has it and you lose your alpha. So you can't really act on something that everyone else has because it starts being baked into the market. I think it's a similar thing here when it comes to outreach, especially outbound.
And so in that sense, what do you think about how does that apply to a company like yours or Clay or Crust Data or, I mean, there are many data companies as well. If everybody has access to it, then aren't the same people are going to get bombarded with mm, mm, and people differentiate, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, I think the key premise of platforms like Databar is that flexibility of it is extremely valuable. So
Mm.
when you're able to drop in different data providers, then there's no single table that's going to be the same as someone else's. Each company, each team has its own twist, its own angle, its own prompt, and that really allows people to differentiate, unless everyone's just using the same template, which also sometimes happens. But I think the key idea here is that even if the source data or the source list is the same, your company's value proposition and the pains that you're trying to solve is going to differ. And the approach, therefore, should also be different. So even though, maybe the same company might get approached multiple times, I think ultimately the company that wins in the inbox is the one that can find the right pain at the right time and present it in a way where the person opening your email or your message actually identifies with it and is willing to get on a call.
So I've been talking to a lot of GTM founders and some have been bringing up how email is dead. Where are you seeing the usage in terms of consumption? Where are your customers using this data? And which channel has been more successful for them?
Email's not dead. I don't think it's dead. I mean, it's certainly reply rates have fallen, especially, with certain mailboxes and certain setups. Certainly replies have fallen, but still you can get in front of your customers. Ultimately, our view is that multi-channel is of course going to perform better than just a single channel approach. And that's why there's a lot of really great platforms out there, such as HeyReach, which allow you to target people on not only email, but also LinkedIn. So I think if email is dying, then a lot of companies would just stop functioning or acquiring new customers. There's thousands of companies that rely purely on cold email to acquire new leads. So my view is that cold email isn't dead. It's just become more sophisticated. So you can no longer just spam hundreds of thousands of people hoping to get the same results you would get maybe 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, multi-channel probably makes sense. And you launched both on Product Hunt and on AppSumo. How was the experience? And was there significant time between those two launches? And what was the experience like?
Both of them have been great. So one thing on Product Hunt is, so when we launched Product Hunt, I'd say a few years ago, certainly there was more engagement and it was more important for us to get one of the top spots. Today, they've changed the algorithm a little bit. Like we recently launched on Product Hunt. So one thing to keep in mind is if anyone from the audience wants to launch on Product Hunt, is to make sure that you get selected as a featured product before your launch day. If you're not selected as a featured product, then there's no way that you can get one of the top products of the day. You're going to be at the bottom of the page, no matter how many upvotes you get. So we didn't know that when we launched, and it got us into a frenzy. I messaged all my friends, and thankfully we were able to get us featured in the end, thanks to my friends who works at Product Hunt. But it was a bit of a stress for us. So Product Hunt, I think, is great. There's no there's no negatives to launching there. I think everyone should do it. In any case, you're going to get eyeballs on your company. You're going to get backlinks. You're going to get comments, and it's a really good reason to post on social media. And posts like that tend to get liked or commented on. With regards to AppSumo, I think it's a more serious launch. So AppSumo has two different launch types. I think there's one that's where you just self-post, you get a higher you get a higher percentage on the sales you make, but also you don't get featured and you don't get all of the promotions of AppSumo. And there's the select program where they craft a video for you, they craft some of the descriptions, they feature you, you're on the homepage, so you get much more visits and much more volume. So we did the featured program, their select program, which got us a lot of customers in the front door, but also a lot of hate. So when our first week on AppSumo was just horrible. When we launched, everyone was essentially complaining that we didn't give enough credits in a lifetime deal, and our credits were one time. Databar operates, if you're familiar, we have a credit system which you can use towards third-party data providers. So when we launched an AppSumo, we gave a limited number of credits, and customers were complaining, saying that, this is horrible, giving us one taco reviews. But thankfully, we were able to turn that around. We responded to every customer request. We changed the deal. We sweetened it quite a bit, and we turned it around.
Audience, I'm assuming AppSumo has a lot different audience than Python.
Yeah. So funnily, on Product Hunt, a lot of the audience is actually founders who are about to launch on Product Hunt.
Right.
So people who are launching in a week are going to be sitting on Product Hunt, generating engagement, getting their badges, getting their followers. So a lot of the people who go on Product Hunt are actually founders, usually really early stage. AppSumo is a slightly different audience, usually freelancers, solopreneurs, they could be small agencies. And in the mix, there's also professionals from really large companies that sit on AppSumo and are looking for good deals. So generally, I'd say AppSumo is a pretty price conscious audience where, naturally people are looking for lifetime deals and pricing is really important to them. But the audience there is amazing for feedback. So if something's not working, no one will hold back. And I think that's the kind of tough love that you need at the early stages of any company. I just wish we did AppSumo earlier. And I think we could have gotten a lot more value out.
And so Do you think people should do both? And what stage should they launch?
Yeah, I would do Product Hunt first, probably like really, really early when you just have an MVP or like a really early product. I would do Product Hunt. If you're not afraid of sharing your idea, just do it. And there, you don't necessarily have to invest into like consultants. There's like consultants that charge $10,000 to set up your product hunt. Just launch, and you'll get fine. Yeah, there's a few out there, really good ones too. But you don't have to do that. Like some companies do it and they get really good results, but you don't have to do it. Just launch. And after you launch a product hunt, I would do AppSumo. So AppSumo is a really good source of first revenue. It's one time. It's lifetime, but it gets you those extra 2, 3, 4 months of runway, depending on how big your team is. And it gets you a lot of customers who are really invested into your product. So I'd say validate on Product Hunt, then in a few months, get a stronger validation from AppSumo. And then with the AppSumo audience, in another few months, you can relaunch on Product Hunt. And all of the customers from AppSumo who love your products are going to push you through your Product Hunt launch.
All right, we've reached the final section. It's called Never Get a Cold Email. Uh, hopefully, people will know you better. A book that you would give to another founder or other founder friends.
Probably a classic one is like 0 to 1.
0 to 1. Well, that friend needs it if they've not read it for sure.
Or just don't do it.
Yeah, don't. What's one founder cliche you secretly agree with?
One founder cliche you secretly agree with. Calendly or cal.com. Book a time in your calendar.
Yeah, there's a lot. Then Chili Piper and yeah, there are many.
Yeah.
At one point, I think I thought of building one myself.
Yeah. You have the perfect audience for that.
What's the one workflow that still feels duct taped together despite all the tools you have?
N8N. I think N8N is extremely powerful, but the flows are like really complicated and require a lot of debugging, technical knowledge. I feel like that process could feel less duct tape, but it's really great. It's better than nothing, but it's still a bit duct tapey.
You use that a lot?
We've started to more and more. Yeah, we use it together with Databar. So we send webhooks there and back and we enrich data. So it's been pretty powerful for us.
Is it a lot of UI plumbing, like a lot of clicks, and is that the cumbersome bit, or what's the lines?
Workflows can break pretty easily. I feel like the setup is a bit of a trial and error process. Like once you start playing around with it, even if you have technical knowledge, you kind of just try something and hope that it works. So it's like the process of the setup.
When a lead shows promise but goes cold, what do you usually do next as a GTM founder?
We follow up and we try to, so one of the things that we're working on right now actually also is the nurturing piece. So if somebody goes cold, there's usually a reason behind it. One of them is that there's no longer interest in their org. It could be that they picked a competitor. It could be that they didn't like the demo that we might have showed them. So there's a number of factors that could have influenced their decision. So depending on that decision and looking at perhaps call transcripts and calls that we had with that customer, we try to understand what that reason could be and we add them into a lead nurturing campaign in order to keep the conversation going. That if in the future they decide to give it another try, then Databar is at top of mind for them. So even if the lead goes cold, then you shouldn't go cold.
Yeah. I think LinkedIn is probably also a good place to keep them warm. Do you guys, like as a founder, do you connect with some of your leads or?
More on email, but I tend to get more into LinkedIn. I've been procrastinating on it, but I definitely want to become more active there.
Really? You're as a GTM founder, you're not active on LinkedIn? That's so surprising.
Yeah. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I am going to get more active.
And so are you thinking of writing more or videos and what's why no action there so far?
Just not a lot of time, unfortunately. We've been doing a lot of product reworks and speaking with customers. So I use LinkedIn a lot, like for connection requests, for speaking with people, for commenting, liking posts that are interesting. I just want to start posting more. Once we start posting, I think there's going to be really interesting content that we can share, especially given that we have Databar. We have this huge source of data, which we can use to feed into really interesting posts and insights. I've been meaning to set that up, but it's just been taking some time.
I think Carta, have you seen posts from Carta? They do
Yeah.
a good job at using their data set too. I love their
Yeah.
posts.
They have a really good data set too.
Yeah, so there
Right.
could be some parallels there. Interesting. All right. Yeah, that was it. Where can people find Databar, and any closing comments for founders like you?
Yeah, just Databar is available at Databar.ai. We have open registration free. If anyone found Databar through this podcast, then please mention that to us, email us, and we'll give you either a few months for free or we'll give you a discount on your first 6 months. The main, I'd say, feedback is, I think when you're building a startup, just do it. Just why not? Even if you're working somewhere, you can, I think with Cursor, it's really easy nowadays. So, and the second thing is, I think that the classic saying is that first time founders focus on products, second time founders focus on go to market. So if you're building a startup, then go to market and growth is just as important as the product you want to build. If you have the best product but no one knows about it, then you're never going to be able to build a big company out of it. So if you'd like to learn more about how to build go to market systems and set up the right playbooks, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to share some of the insights that we have.
Well, David, thanks for taking the time, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Vishesh.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.